All right, rolling. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, on another episode at the Cusp of Freedom. Today I have a very special friend of mine, Ellis. I'll let him introduce himself to tell you what he does.
My name is Ellis Peterson, and I am a retired civil engineer. These days I work in biotechnology equities.
Nice. So as you know, we're here to tell you why and how we do what we are at Digital Nomads, so that you can see from our examples the challenges and the expectations that you should have when going into the domain that we are in. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. I'm your host for this podcast, Marvin Tikio. So Ellis, you said you're a retired civil engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were a kid, what did you dream of becoming a civil engineer?
I think that was one of the really big challenges for me, is that I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Yep.
And so I went through middle school and high school, and I got good grades. I enjoyed science, I enjoyed math, did track and cross country, and that was very rewarding for me. But when it came time to apply to college, I just didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And so it's actually chance that I ended up being a civil engineer. I was applying to California Polytechnic State University, and as part of the application, there was a drop-down menu where you had to choose your major. I didn't know what to choose. I didn't even know what school I was going to go to. And so I randomly selected civil engineering, and I spent the next 12 years of my life working in that industry simply because I did not have a strong understanding of what I wanted to do with my life.
Interesting. So most people that go to college go majoring in something that their parents influenced them to major in. When you were going to college, did your parents have any influence, whether you did science or politics or did you just go into civil engineering because you love solving problems? What was your strength that you saw that you could do engineering? What strength did you feel like you had?
So the answer is yes. So both of my parents were in science. My father was a surgeon and my mother was a nurse, and they met at college in Los Angeles. And so for me, I really was pushed towards science. It was something that my father was very passionate about. I didn't have a strong desire to be a surgeon. The idea of cutting people open was not super appealing to me. I didn't really want to do that. I saw surgeries when I was young, and for me it was like, wow, this is really crazy. You're actually cutting people open and there's blood everywhere. And so one of my brothers was very interested in doing that. I wanted to do something else. And so I really excelled in science and mathematics in school, and engineering seemed to be a good fit. My oldest brother was at Cornell University for aerospace engineering, and he really enjoyed his program. So part of the reason that I went into engineering was following after my brother's footsteps. Both of them ended up being engineers. My selection of civil engineering specifically was the random choice, because I did not actually know.
Okay. So while you were in college, what were some challenges that you went through before graduating? And if you could go back and choose a new major, would you choose civil engineering again?
Oh gosh. So the courses were incredibly demanding. A lot of the prerequisite courses, chemistry and physics and calculus, were just very time consuming. I was taking a lot of units every quarter, and so for me the challenge wasn't even the difficulty of my classes, it was just the sheer volume of work that I had to do on any given week. And so just keeping on top of my studies was really challenging. And I did enjoy college, but I spent a lot of college extremely stressed, kind of just doing what I could to manage my stress and enjoy myself. And I forgot, what was the second part of the question that you asked?
If you could go back and choose the same major, would you?
Yeah, I think that I would, because what I really loved about civil engineering was that you had to know a lot of things about many different subjects. You were not necessarily super dialed into nuance and detail of one specific thing. You had to know a little of this and a little of that. And so when it came time for me to walk away from civil engineering, I had a skill set which essentially enabled me to learn, to go out and find information about a lot of different subjects and to familiarize myself with those subjects. And that's ultimately what I ended up doing, was finding a different field and educating myself about that field and finding a niche that was profitable for me.
Interesting. So you would say that going into and becoming a civil engineer from college gave you the critical thinking skills to, figure your way out after college, basically.
Absolutely. And I think that people that have very, very specific fields, maybe it's like computer science or something, you have a great skill set for doing a specific thing. Civil engineering is much more broad, and so what I could have transitioned into if I had done a different kind of engineering would have been much more limited. But I actually had a very broad breadth of different things that I could segue into.
Interesting. Do you know anything about mechanical engineering? Which, if you could compare civil engineering to any other type of common engineering these days, what would you compare it to?
Well, so I think that what people need to understand when they're applying to a university is that when people talk about salaries after graduation, those numbers are highly tortured statistics. What people are earning is not actually what universities are advertising that people are going to earn. And so if you are a structural engineer, if you are, which is a form of civil engineering, but a higher pay grade form than what I did. I personally did water resources, computer science, biomed,
Biotech?
Yes, exactly. So these are the careers that people can make proper good money in, and they can survive in American cities. Not all forms of engineering are going to pay the kind of salaries that allow you to live in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. You end up being the working poor. So the kind of engineering that you do, you have to consider what lifestyle you're going for.
Yeah.
And so for me, I realized very early on in my career that civil engineering was a field in which the increase in salary over time wasn't even close to making up for the increase of cost of living over time.
So the horizon was not promising.
No, I was literally forced to leave the profession that I was in by simple economics. I mean, you look at the graph, my salary is doing this, the cost of living is doing this, and I'm saying, I'm okay right now, but in 5 years from now, I'm going to be legitimately poor and struggling to pay rent.
Interesting. So that's the point where you realized that civil engineering wasn't going to cut it. After how long in the industry?
So, full decade. I was a professional civil engineer. I had the license. I was in a management position. I enjoyed a lot of the work that I did. I was not someone who had a big interest in managing personnel. That's just not a strong skill set of mine. And so at a certain point, the only way that you can make more money is to manage personnel. And that was something that I did, and I felt like I was babysitting the people that were working under me, and I was just not a good personality type to be managing other people.
That's a good thing to realize in your career. So while in college, do you feel like, because I know a lot of Americans that go to college, one, don't go to major in something that they see has a bright horizon, but also go and get into a lot of debt.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have any issues with student loans? And if you could give one advice going into college to major in engineering and whatnot, what would you give them? What would you tell them so that they can be better prepared for debt or student loans?
Yeah, so I had a very specific situation, which was that my father made an enormous amount of money, but he was a deadbeat father. My parents got divorced, and he didn't pay child support, and he was not a part of the family. So when you go to get loans or grants or scholarships in the United States, you're judged based on how much money your parents make. So I was not eligible for any scholarships of any kind whatsoever, just based on the income of my father, which I was not a part of whatsoever. And so it was 100% the full tuition. There's a situation that I was able to receive in-state tuition in California, and so that did reduce the cost a bit, but college is very expensive in the United States, and I did leave with a lot of debt. And when I went into industry, the salary that I was making was so little that the only way that I was ever going to pay off my debts was if I lived with my mother and I just didn't spend money at all. And so that's what I did for 5-6 years. I just didn't spend any money at all. And I was paying something crazy like 7% interest
Wow.
on my yeah. I mean, it's a system where we are really not capable of providing an efficient education in the United States anymore. The cost of university has gotten totally out of control, and it's a really big problem. You've got people that are going into liberal arts degrees at private universities. They're leaving with $300,000 in debt, and how do you pay that? That for me is a big challenge. So if people can get scholarships, that helps a lot, but the system isn't necessarily fair. Some places it lacks nuance.
Wow, that's a very good perspective. I like how you stayed with your mom until you paid off a chunk of your debt. So that's something most people out there that have parents can do to reduce that headache. So when you were in the civil engineering industry for a decade, what were some challenges that you had during your day-to-day jobs, and what clicked for you to say, I'm done with this?
Gosh, I would say that cultural issues were the biggest problem. So I worked for baby boomers.
Was it hard to get a job?
There was a period of time directly after university where I did not have a job in my field. I worked briefly for a very kind family friend of mine that owned a law firm, and so I was able to have work while I was sending out resumes and looking for a job. And I got a job within my industry, I want to say 3-4 months after I graduated.
Okay.
And my first job was pure chaos. It was a startup, a small engineering land development firm in a place called Austin, Texas. A lot of good people working there, but also a lot of growing pains associated with a small company getting a lot bigger very quickly. Yeah. And the challenge, I think, was just that there was this fetish around sacrifice and working very hard. And I'm all for working hard and creating an effective product and good customer service, but life also has to be lived at the same time. There needs to be a balance, and there just was no balance at all there. And so I struggled with depression.
Thanks to your job.
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. Just the sheer number of hours that I was working and the intensity of the expectations. Unfortunately, what I realized when I graduated and went to my first civil engineering job is that I had not meaningfully learned skills that were useful for my job. So I had learned the theories behind all of the tasks that I was going to do, but I didn't actually learn how to do any of the tasks that I would need to do. And a really good example is civil engineers do most of their work in drafting software. So maybe this is like AutoCAD or something like this. I did not have a single class for AutoCAD within my major. I had to take classes outside of my major to get any experience whatsoever. And then you go to a civil engineering job and you sit in front of AutoCAD for 50 hours a week. And so it's great to have all of this chemistry and physics and all of these things. It's great to know that. But really, it would have been a lot better to have skills in the things that I actually have to do. So I was learning on the job. The people that I was working for, they had way more work than they could do. So it's difficult for them to take the time to teach you everything that you need to know because they're just trying to get their work done. And that was a real challenge, to learn and to also be productive without having the skills to do the work. And that's what I really struggled with in the beginning of my career.
Interesting. It's funny you said the main course that you needed in order to do your job effectively you didn't really take in college. I feel the same way. Like, I went to college for computer engineering, and right out of college doing software engineering, I didn't do any coding in school, so I had to learn everything on the job. But yeah, it was a struggle. I think most people actually go through similar situations, and I think you actually you stuck with the startup, the same startup, right, for a decade?
No. I was there for a couple of years, and then I transitioned to a different company. It was a really, really tough environment. The company that I moved to afterwards was a little bit more established, and that was an easier but a similar work environment. And then I transitioned to a third company, which was much more established, and that was quite a bit easier. So this was an engineering firm that had been around for a long time. The managers were very good mentors. Really the first time that I had properly had mentorship in my industry was the third job that I had. Because again, startups are just doing everything that they can to increase their client base, get cash flow coming in, and they don't have a lot of time to mentor young engineers.
Yeah, so I mean, when you applied for jobs and you went into a startup to begin with, I'm sure you knew that startups require a really high work ethic.
Yeah.
Were you doing that to get a higher pay raise, better stock options, and you realized that it wasn't worth the stress?
So the way that civil engineering works, there really isn't any opportunity for ownership for young engineers. And when you start, you're not an engineer, right? You're just an EIT, or an engineer in training. And so you're not going to be offered ownership in a company until you're a professional engineer, which is 4 or 5 years minimum. And so really you're just working for whatever salary they will give. And what was I making my first job out of college? Making like 45 grand a year or something like that. So in the scope of the cost of living in a place like Austin, Texas, and the student loans that I had, essentially meant that I couldn't pay off my student loans at all if I was living by myself.
Interesting. So would you say that going to college to take courses that you're not really going to need on the job and pick up a bunch of debt for those courses makes college not a good choice these days?
I think that our colleges are so uncompetitive that we are going to have a very hard time keeping other people from coming and taking these jobs. I mean, India can teach people the skills that they need to know for an appropriate cost, and those people can work remotely in the United States, and they can justify the lower salaries because they're not living in the United States. And so I think that American civil engineering companies are going to have a very, very hard time attracting young Americans because our education system just isn't competitive. It's a luxury. We have these big, beautiful, sprawling campuses. We have these sports teams. I mean, I went to a polytechnic university, a science university, and we had a volleyball team, and we had a football team, and we had all of these teams, and all of these kids are on scholarships. And I'm kind of sitting there thinking, well, this isn't a university for sports. This is a university for science. And there are all sorts of ways to reduce the cost of this education, but the money's just being thrown everywhere.
Wow, that's a very good point you just made. So when you were working in the industry for a decade and you were switching jobs, you've mentioned some challenges that you went through in your first job, or some challenges that you went through in your third job when you weren't working at a startup and you were working at a more established company.
So I think that what I learned at my first job was that a young startup wasn't a place that I wanted to be. And that was the main takeaway. And then I went to a second company that was a startup, but it was quite a bit less chaotic. There was more structure there. There was more consistency, but it was still a startup. And I said after that, I really need something that's pretty well established with systems in place to do the work and to manage the people. And so it wasn't until I went to the third job and I said, okay, I'm working with engineers that I really respect. These people are very good at what they do. They're very good mentors. They're very skillful at dealing with municipalities, government employees. And it wasn't until I had that third job that I said, all of the problems that I had previously in my career aren't here, but I'm still not happy. So it took going to a company that was doing civil engineering about as well as it's possible to do civil engineering to realize that, okay, the problem is actually civil engineering. It's not,
it's not the company.
Yeah, it's not the company, it's civil engineering. And so I really respect the people that I worked with that last company. The company was called LJA Engineering, and they were incredibly good at what they did. And so I was there long enough to learn this is not the industry for me. And so that is something that I'm grateful for, to have the experience to know that, this isn't what I want to do.
For most people that quit their corporate job, they usually quit because they see people that have been in that job for 2 decades, 3 decades, and they realize that they don't see themselves like those people in the future before they decide to quit. But you, apparently, it seems like you weren't even looking at that perspective. You just realized that this industry isn't for me, so I'm not happy, and I just think the industry is not for me. So what was the process of going from that industry into the next one, biotech?
So I started working in biotech just from a purely investment perspective while I was in engineering. And I wasn't comfortable leaving engineering until I got to a point where I was consistently making good money. I felt comfortable about what I was doing. I mean, leaving a job and having no income stream is terrifying in the United States because the cost of living is so extraordinarily high. Most young people, you've got a month or two of runway, and then you're, living on the street. Or, for me, I wouldn't be living on the street. I have a wonderful mother. She would have allowed me to stay at her house. And so the consequences were less severe, but that wasn't something that I really wanted to do. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life living with my mother. And so it was a process of learning how to make money outside of my traditional career that made me feel comfortable leaving my traditional career.
Interesting. How did that process go, and what did you find as an alternative stream of income?
So yeah, I think that for me, I really enjoyed statistics in college. And so a lot of the biotech industry, you have these companies that are developing emerging medicines, and they will publish data from clinical studies that they do. And they will hype up that data to say, this is so effective at treating whatever, and we think that the market opportunity is 10 billion or whatever. And so what I kind of did is I said, I'm not interested in what this company's story is. I want to look at the data directly. So I started looking at clinical studies, and I started looking at the statistics that were used, and I did a fair amount of statistics in college, and a lot of this stuff is not super complicated statistics. I mean, it's fairly basic stuff. And you look at things that, there's 40 people in the trial, and they're basing their results on 10 people, and they've excluded 10 people. And you look at the reasons why they excluded the data for the 10 people, and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. That's not a realistic reason to exclude the data. And if you add that data back in, you say, well, this product doesn't have a statistically demonstrable benefit to a patient that takes it. And so that's a pretty good opportunity to take some bearish derivative positions on a company and just wait until people figure out that, hey, this product doesn't actually work. And a lot of the biotech industry is just kind of a hype engine to get money for these very expensive clinical trials. And so I kind of just started becoming a bullshit detective. I'd go around and I'd look for stuff that was that seemed right, and I'd maybe invest in that on the long side. And if I saw something, I said, these guys are just selling a story to make money, and there's nothing here, well, I'd take a position on the short side. And it's a very chaotic industry, so you don't put all your eggs in one basket, but maybe you do that across 40 companies. And the average across all of those positions is your profit. Yeah, is your profit, exactly.
Interesting. So, man, that's a very smart move. You took a position on debunking these companies. Okay, so what were some challenges? I guess it wasn't very challenging because you were really good at statistics.
Well, I mean,
what gave you the idea?
I think that what gave me the idea was a general distrust of the pharma industry in the United States. And so I really don't trust, let's take Pfizer for example. So we have all of these boosters for the coronavirus vaccines. You look at both Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah, you get COVID.
Yeah, you look at how they approved these updated boosters, and they did a test on 8 mice, and with that data, they created a vaccine, or they had already created a vaccine, but they tested it on 8 mice, and then they gave it to millions of people. And so for me, I just really don't trust big business in the United States because it's not interested in the best interests of the customers. It's purely a profit-driven engine. And I felt this way since I was 10 years old. We give people drugs that they simply don't need because it's profitable. And so the pharmaceutical industry has always been something interesting to me because I've had a huge distrust of it my whole life. And so these two things, the science background from engineering and the general distrust of pharmaceuticals, are really what brought me to the place where I was looking at these things and then found a way to make money off of them, and I didn't think I would make money. I was just fucking around, and it worked, and then it kept working, and I said, whoa, okay, maybe eventually I don't have to go to my 50, 55 hour a week desk job. I can just do this from a computer.
Interesting. So I got two questions. Do you still bet against the big pharma and play devil's advocate? And
so I don't. I only deal with small cap.
Okay.
And what I have realized is the guys like Pfizer and Moderna, they will probably always win simply because in the United States, we really value profit. And so when Pfizer makes a whole bunch of money selling vaccines that don't do people any good to foreign countries, that's money coming to the United States. The federal government likes that. Those are jobs. And so there really isn't a lot of incentive for a government like the United States to take Pfizer to task for being dishonest. Like, they sold the vaccine to everyone as, we're gonna give it to infants because the infants will take the vaccine and that will help stop it spreading to vulnerable populations like old people or immune compromised people. But they never tested it to see if it stopped the spread. They just told people that it would, or they insinuated that it would. And so there is an extraordinary amount of dishonesty that the government seems generally willing to play along with because it's convenient for them.
So you're not betting against Uncle Sam?
No. I don't believe that the world operates in a way where the best player or the most honest player wins. Most things are highly contorted. Most things are very political.
Do you think it'll always be like that?
People that have power don't have a lot of reason to give it up. So if there was a French Revolution-like event, maybe. But under business as usual, no, I don't see that changing.
Interesting. So once you had your cushion from betting against small cap businesses, and you use that as your leverage to get your next opportunity, what opportunity did you get, and how challenging was it to get that opportunity?
Well, it's kind of a limitless money printing machine because these small biotechs, they pop up constantly.
Yeah.
And so it's a bit like cryptocurrency. I'm a believer that there is a segment of the cryptocurrency market that is very, very valuable, that has useful technology that can add to the future. But 90% of it is just complete BS. It's just people that are taking advantage of other people for profit. Biotech is quite similar. And so there's a small segment of the biotech industry that is doing amazing science, and they are changing the future. But most of it is just garbage. And so, until people stop creating and trying to sell garbage, business is good.
Okay. So the reason you got into biotech, would you say, is because you realized that did it have anything to do with you betting against small cap medical or pharmaceutical companies? Did that give you like the incentives to say, okay, there's a lot of opportunities in the biotech fields and I can find opportunity there pretty constantly?
Yeah, I would say that I prefer investing. I think the purpose of the stock market is that it is an equity pool for emerging business to fund things that will benefit the world.
Yeah.
And that's what the stock market should be. Our stock market is very poorly designed. And so what it functionally is a casino. I don't think that short selling should exist. And in fact, I really don't think that derivatives in general should exist because that's what creates this casino.
Yeah.
And I use these things because they exist and because they're profitable, but I would happily vote to remove short selling. I just don't think it's something that is conducive to making the world a better place.
I totally agree with that, actually. I think it's an opportunity for people to just take advantage of it.
Well, and so it's the ultimate monopolistic tool, too, because if you have a massive pharmaceutical company and you're making billions of dollars, and one of your small competitors is potentially bringing a product to market, you can short sell their stock into oblivion, and then that company does not have an equity pool to dip into to bring their product to market. So it's actually hugely toxic to the free market. It's something that we simply shouldn't do. It shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't exist. But people do it at such an extraordinary level. I mean, if you look at the market for the last year, the amount of Bill Gates, for example, I think he's got like a $300 million short position on Tesla stock. And it's like, is this a good thing? Is this, what we should be doing? No, but people are doing it until we regulate it out of existence. Why not make some money?
Do you think it's just like a power play amongst the rich?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that it is something, the short selling that we have these days is extreme. We've never seen, you look at stocks all over the place in the NASDAQ that are 30, 40% shorted. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's nuts.
I mean, it's crazy. This is not something that's really ever existed in history. And I think that unless we get some good regulation in place, we're just going to totally destroy the stock market. There's going to be no faith in it. And the only reason the stock market exists is because historically things have gone up. Yeah. That's why people invest in it.
Yeah.
So if you look at the last 100 years, it's always kind of gone up. But if you let people make money off of crushing other companies and the stock market as a whole starts going down, why would people invest in it?
Yeah, not only that, but companies that could have possibly brought value would not be bringing value as much as they could have.
Which means that we're not getting new products, we're not getting new medicines, we're not getting all of the essence of why the stock market existed is evaporating in an enormous hurry, and it's really unfortunate. I think that I don't know what the SEC does.
I mean, I don't know, enforce capitalism? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, they're a consumer protection agency, but they're asleep at the wheel, or they're being bribed, or I don't. It is astonishing to me the things that corporate America manages to get away with, and there seems to be little to no oversight, and there's no consequences, right?
Yeah.
So if you look at like the Wells Fargo CEO from the housing crisis, this guy did things that were just clearly illegal, immoral, and made an insane amount of money. And so what were the consequences? He had to pay a couple $100 million. That's just a tax on profit.
Yeah.
That's not a punishment.
That isn't.
There's no incentive to not do these things if you're never going to see jail time, and the fees that you pay are just a small portion of the profit that you already made. So we have garbage regulation. We really have a problem with regulation in our country.
I totally agree. So how long have you been retired for, and how long did you work in the biotech industry?
So I did the civil engineering for 10 years. 3 years ago I stopped. Well, okay, so I sort of was doing the civil engineering and the biotech a bit at the same time, but I totally stopped the civil engineering. It's been about 3 years ago. And it's the best decision I ever made. I was quite unhappy.
Interesting.
My life really started about 3 years ago.
Is that how long you've been a digital nomad for? 3 years?
Yeah.
Interesting. So, what clicked for you to start traveling? Because I know 2/3 of Americans don't have passports.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow! I didn't realize that.
Yeah, the system is working, man.
That's crazy.
Yeah. How long? I mean, what clicked for you to start traveling? Did your parents instill travel in you when you were younger? When was the first time you left America?
So a little bit. The first time that I left the United States, I was an infant, and I don't remember it. My parents went to Jamaica when I was 3 or 4 years old. I think the first international trip that I really have a good memory of wasn't until I was 13 or 14. No, that's not true. I went at 11. I went on a Carnival cruise, and we went to the Caribbean. And I ate 13 burgers, 13 cheeseburgers in 3 days. Yeah, they had a buffet that was 24 hours a day. And I was quite a chubby young child, and there was limitless burgers. And so in this 3-day cruise, I ate a pretty impressive number of cheeseburgers.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Yeah, no, I was too. It was quite an accomplishment.
Interesting. So how did traveling like that for the first time, how did that shape your perspective from an early age? Did you feel like the world was a lot bigger than you expected or perceived? Or
Yeah, I think that what I realized was that there were many different ways to live life, and that I was living one very specific life. You know, you go to school in the United States, and you are kind of conditioned to think a certain way.
you thought like that at 11 years old?
Yeah, I mean, you go to different parts of the world and you realize, hey, like these kids aren't even going to school.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not going to say that that's better. You know, there are tough economic situations and people are working at a young age instead of having the privilege of going to school. And the education is absolutely a privilege. So is the passport.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm quite negative about a lot of things involving American culture, but I have an enormous amount of gratitude about the fact that I have citizenship in a country that allows me to leave the country, and it gives me a passport that's very powerful in the world. And then I had an education, so I have the mind to go elsewhere and to be effective.
Yeah.
And all of those things are a huge privilege.
Yep. Okay, so when was this your first time traveling solo when you quit your job?
Yeah.
Okay, so how did that shape your perspective, and how was that different from when you were 11 going to?
Yeah, gosh. As a kid, you're just a passenger, you know? You're not in charge of anything. And so, you know, we did what my parents wanted to do. And family trips were always a bit challenging. I would fight with my brothers, and my parents were frustrated that we were kind of like the Tasmanian devil. The three of us were just like this spinning tornado of fists.
How about your brother? I thought you said
Yeah, so I've got two older brothers, and we get along incredibly well now, but when we were young, we just fought like crazy. And so on all family vacations, we were just fighting like crazy. And then, you know, COVID started, lockdowns in the United States. And I sort of thought, I understand that this is dangerous for people that are older, people that are immune compromised, but this is not an issue for me. And I'm not interested in sitting here and being in this, you know, societal jail cell where I can't do anything or go anywhere. And so I started looking around and doing research, and hey, Mexico is the place to go. And I just kind of a matter of circumstance that I went down there, and I learned how to exist, which was a crazy idea, because I'd never lived in a foreign country, and so I was so American.
Yeah.
You know, I had my job that I was working my ass off. I had the single family house that I bought that I was personally renovating, like doing construction in the house myself. I had the side hustle, which was this biotech investing. I mean, I didn't do anything but work. And then I went to a foreign country where people don't fetishize working all the time. And I learned what it was to exist. And I feel like that's when my life actually started, was going to Mexico and just existing instead of constantly working all the time and fantasizing about the Porsche I was going to have someday and the trophy wife and, you know, all of, you know.
American dream,
Yeah, the American dream.
Okay.
Exactly.
So what were some cultural challenges that you had for your first time traveling?
Gosh, you know, I don't actually feel like I had any challenges. I had nothing but relief. And so I love Mexican culture. Mexicans in general have amazing humor. They don't take themselves too seriously. They're very willing to laugh at themselves and others. You know, in Mexico, there's kind of this idea that things aren't perfect. Yes, there are problems, but we have today, and so we're gonna live in the moment. And so just living in the moment and not obsessing about the day when I was going to be richer or more attractive or have a better job. I just said, I'm going to live today. And that was, it wasn't a challenge at all. It was the most amazing awakening of my life. It really feels like when my life started, to be quite honest.
Wait, okay, so if you could add anything to our educational system, what would you add to it?
I think that we need to move away from the fetish of hard work. I don't think that hard work is a virtue. I think that being effective is a virtue. And I think that we need to give young people the idea that it's not about how hard you work or how much you work, it's about how effective you are. And a lot of times, to be more effective, you have to work less. And so we have just this crazy obsession with working all the time. And when I was working with baby boomers, they were very proud of how much time they spent working. They would brag about how many hours they spent working and how much life they spent working. And they would talk about the distance that it created with their children and their family because they were always working. And I thought, this is quite crazy. Like, we've got this obsession with work, and it's a bit blind. It lacks context.
It is. Now that we've discussed why and how you became a digital nomad, let's shine some perspectives on some life philosophy that you have or that you've learned over the years, which one can take to be like you or better. So if somebody was to take your path, what advice would you give them for them to end up like you or better?
So I would say the number one thing is learn to remove yourself from the constant competition of Western culture. If you are in competition with every single person that you ever encounter, you are not going to have any meaningful interactions with anyone that you meet. And we really are trained to constantly be in competition. Like, if you and I were in an American bar and there was a cute woman over there, you and I couldn't realistically be friends because we'd be competing for that woman. You and I could not have honest conversations. I couldn't be open and vulnerable with you. And so constant competition really separates us from other humans. And that is something that I think is inherently toxic. We can't always be trying to be the best at everything. Sometimes it's okay to just exist and enjoy your life. And that's very hard to get away from in the United States. And so I think that if someone wants to live my life, they need to get out of the United States as young as possible. Don't go to college. Graduate high school and leave the United States. That's my advice. Go travel for a couple of years, see what it's like to live a different experience in a different country with a different culture. And once you've done that, maybe there are some things from your culture that are valuable and that you want to take. And maybe there are things from other cultures that are valuable you want to take. And you can take all of those components and you can put them together and you can make the life that feels right for you. But if you only ever spend time in one culture, then you're never going to have the tools of other cultures to make the life that's right for you.
That's very powerful advice, bro. That's very, very powerful advice. And I've actually heard that from other friends of mine. Like, just take a year off and just travel and figure out what you want to do. So how do you balance your work life and your travel life? How do you manage your time? And what are the most challenging parts of traveling for you?
So the traveling part is quite easy. I'm a minimalist. I have very few possessions. And so, everything I own fits into a suitcase about this big. I literally have 2 pairs of pants and 2 pairs of shorts and 6 t-shirts. Nice. I've been wearing this for 3 days. So for me, I really don't care a lot for possessions, so that makes travel very, very easy. I'm sorry, I forgot what all the question was. Can you?
No, just some challenges that you go through when you travel, and I forgot the other part, but I think you answered the other part.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for me, just learning the language and being humble, because I think that again, as Americans, we're not really conditioned for humility. Yeah. So just being humble and engaging with people honestly, and I really like to find a way to let people that I meet teach me things. This is something that's really important. This is how I let people know that their culture and who they are personally is important and special. I want everyone I meet to teach me something, even if it's a very small thing. And so really the only things that are challenging for me when I travel is reconciling the American culture that I work in, because biotechnology investing is super American. I mean, it's the stock market, it's, everything is about profit. And so it's this uber capitalistic work environment. And then I'm living a life that is exactly the opposite of that. That's, focused on being mindful and being humble and not caring about possessions or stature. And so sometimes those two themes, they kind of clash a bit.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you. One, what do you think would be the ripple effect if more people traveled? Do you think the toxic capitalism power-hungry system we have will still exist if majority of people just traveled and gained more perspective. But what do you think would be like the ripple effect on the world if more people just traveled?
Yeah. Gosh. So let's talk about a place called Tulum. And so Tulum is a small city in Mexico that I traveled to 18 years ago. And it was a very, very small town with beautiful ruins surrounded by cenotes in the jungle. There was nothing there. And over the years, it's become a very, very popular place to travel for American tourists. So much so that these days people pay for everything there in dollars. They don't even use pesos anymore. And if you go to the bar and you order a cocktail, it's going to be $30. And so I think that if enough people did what I did, we would just gentrify the whole world. We would gentrify everywhere that was nice. Thailand, Bali. Everything would just turn into a replica of the commercial world that we have in the United States, because commercialism is just this amoeba that consumes everything. And so the lifestyle that I live works, I think, because there's only a small number of people doing it. But if the whole country was doing it, I think we'd ruin the whole world.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that. Oh my God. Wow, that's a good perspective. I've heard that one before. I mean, just to rebuttal on that though, I would say giving people more perspective on how to be humble and how to, integrate culturally and stuff like that would change people's perspective on what it means to live a life that's purposeful. And I think capitalism will come to a halt because more people will be, will have perspective. More people will understand like the effect that they have when going to other places. And maybe our governments will get reshaped because people will we'll have more activists or something like that to tell the governments like, hey, I don't know. But
I hope so. I hope so. I'm not optimistic about that because I recognize that the people that have power in this world have no interest in giving it up. And so again, unless young people are willing to overthrow all of our capitalistic governments, and I don't see that happening. In the United States, I think that if young people tried to overthrow the government, they just kill us all. They just mow us down. So absolutely, I think so.
Wow.
What can we do? We can we can vote. Let's be serious. It's not a democracy. It's an oligarchy. You've got two people that you can vote for, and each of them do meaningfully the same things.
Yeah,
there's no third party, there's no options. When you have two choices, you don't have a democracy. You have this team and that team. And so voting is totally meaningless in our country. So what else do? We go into the streets and we wave pickets, and I don't know. The Democratic Party decides that, okay, you're right. We're gonna let go of our power and we're gonna change things. I don't see it happening.
Interesting. Wow. Man, I kind of shut in a way. Anyway, if there's any last key word of advice or philosophy perspective that you can shine or give the audience watching this today, what would you give them?
Yeah, so I think that I just want to return to the competition thing. I think that there are certain times that it's appropriate to be competitive, but being competitive all of the time in life just completely prohibits you from meaningfully connecting with people. And it's a very lonely life to live if you're in competition with everyone around you. So just try to be less competitive, which is, something that we're not at all trained to do. It's exactly the opposite of what we're trained to do.
Honestly, I can see that though, because we have so many distractions, like you said, all these sports and social media. You can't even go into a coffee shop and have a conversation with somebody because everyone is just so.
It's a competition. I've got a cooler opinion than you that I'm going to tell you about it, or something. It's
okay, you want a cookie?
You start telling someone about a band and it's let me tell you about a cooler band. Every conversation that especially in LA where I was, everything is a competition. And maybe you don't have to be the coolest or the wealthiest. Maybe you can just be the dude that's
you.
Living his life and is kind to people around him. I think that's a pretty good goal.
Interesting. Do you think no matter what the majority of us do has a ripple effect on what happens at the top?
No, I don't.
So you don't think that so you think that no matter how no matter how well our best practices are on an individual level to be our best selves, if all of us do it, you don't think it have a ripple effect on what happens at the top?
I don't think we're meaningfully different than Russia or China. I think we tell ourselves we are. I think we've got really effective propaganda. Our media makes us feel superior, but I don't think we're any different.
Wow. Well, it's been an honor having you on this show, Ellis, and I really respect your perspective.
Yeah.
And I hope people watching can understand what it takes to be like you or better in the future. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.